say, and if it goes out there before it comes back to me, it'll come back to me anyway.
Yeah, if you can't hear it, then you don't know what
Yeah.
you said. That's
Kind of weird.
I've noticed that. So anyway, I was telling the listening audience a minute ago that there are two topics that we pretty much really can't avoid discussing, although we can talk about other things too. But one would be the upcoming presidential stuff, and that's immigration is
Yeah.
floating around as a big topic in that, and the other is the ongoing deportations that are going on right now. So I just finished an article about that. But otherwise, first, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Yeah, maybe I should. We never know who's listening, and that's the good thing. My name is Ricardo Diaz. I've been in Urbana almost 10 years now.
Wow.
Came from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, and I think my first couple of years were very much exploratory. I hadn't really left Philly. I was going back and forth, kept my business up. And then we had a baby, and that was it. There was no way to be traveling. But at the time, there was a big, I don't remember who sponsored it, but there was a series of lectures on immigration by several departments. And that was, for me, a good gateway to who were the academics on this topic
Yeah.
around that area.
You mean here? There was a...
Yeah, here at U of I. And at the same time, I met you, and I met Dulce and Martina and somebody else. But I came here to your Monday nights. It was a ritual for a little while. I would do a little segment on immigration, and you guys did the rest of Resistencia de la Raza. And so, eventually I try to avoid being hired by the university, the big monster. I want to do something independent. It didn't work. Within a couple of years, I was working for the university, and then I've now moved twice. I started out in extension, I came back to extension. So for a day job, I work for working with youth in 4-H in northern counties in the state.
Oh, okay.
So here in this county, I just am a volunteer, and I have my kids in 4-H, and I take them, and tomorrow night is Clover Buds, and my little guy loves going to Clover Buds, and so it's not just enjoyable, it's a pleasure to see that something that I work for also has a part in which my family can be involved with, and there's a richness. We're building up an organization, and the organization benefits you. It's kind of like a beautiful two-way. But that's my day job. As you and I have, I was thinking actually at our last meeting last week, some of the issues we were talking about directly related to the first organization that you and I were involved with, and that was with the Hispanic Children's Foundation.
Yeah, yeah.
And while we didn't formalize it further and we went away, both of our energies, when it comes to these issues, ended up going then towards the immigration, what is now called the Immigration Forum, a 501c3 pillar in the community kind of stuff. But we started out in a different track at the time. And I'm glad we did this. It's proven to be, what are we, our 6th year?
Yeah.
I think we're around that age now. And so there you go. We overlapped a little bit on both of those, being on the board, but then Immigration Forum took off, and then it went hard, and we've had some small moments, but we mostly have done pretty active. I'm always surprised that 3 or 4 things going on at once, and I'm only participating in one. There's a whole group of people doing a bunch of others. So that's my story.
Yeah.
That's my intro.
Well, thank you. That's a better intro than I usually do. Just start talking.
You do fine.
I've got dirt all over my hands. That's so weird. Anyway, sorry.
Just put it out the window and show it to the audience.
Just working on stuff today, and I realized I didn't get very cleaned up from that. Anyway, yeah, so one of the things I find myself when I do this show, unless I have a guest who brings a very specific topic with them, I always end up talking about the same things over and over again. Because it just seems that, I talk about how politics affects the life on the ground for people that are actually here. How if you just left people to their own devices, they would be sort of working something out, but instead there are politicians off somewhere ranting and raving and making people uncomfortable and creating situations that are difficult for them and making it hard for them to settle in and just be and live. And I talk a little bit about how, if you strip all the politics out of it, immigrants are just people and they're just here. And the difference between someone coming from Indiana and someone coming from Chile is not that different in terms of what it means to the community, but it's really different for the person who's doing the traveling.
Yeah.
And so there's has a big effect on them, and there's a lot of adjusting and changing involved for them, but for the community there shouldn't be as much of that. It shouldn't matter to us where somebody comes from. It's just they're new and we should welcome them. So that's things like that. I tend to just talk about them over and over again.
Well, because the difference is the show only happens once a week.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of life is all week, and those things are related all week.
Yeah.
Sometimes when even when I'm traveling, I see a little notice on immigration, something happening, and it's just as good as if I was reading it in my own living room. The
Mm-hmm.
issue is still with me, and the problems and the possible actions are still there. So, I view the show as a little window into, let's say, the shopping mall. You see things going back and forth and going all through there.
Mm-hmm.
Your window may be just a small segment of it, but it's still flowing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing that you come back to the topics, because they continue to be present, and for the rest of us out in the community, we may not be thinking about it all week,
Yeah.
whereas you are, and so it gets synthesized once a week. But I find no problem with it.
No, it feels repetitive to me. I make these same points over and over again. I don't know. I wish sometimes that I had a greater understanding or greater knowledge that I could impart or share with people, but instead I just tend to just say what I know and say what I feel.
Well, we wish very much that we could be able to change things so it wasn't the same darn thing every week.
Mm-hmm.
But things aren't changing, and so what are we going to do?
Yeah, well, if anything, they're changing for the worse, I think.
It certainly seems like it. For some reason, I when I listen to the Trumps and everybody who tries to outdo him, it seems to me like, you know what? They are, if Trump is wrong, anybody that joins him is joining the wrong. But
Yeah.
it doesn't make it any more real, any more whatever.
Mhm.
If they win, I just saw, I don't know if you've seen it, or if you could, is your laptop on the air?
Yeah.
Do a well, in Facebook, that's where I saw it. But there's a short video. It probably came from YouTube, in which Reagan and Bush father are having a debate for the League of Women's Voters, and they're talking about immigration. And I was very impressed. I saw it late last night. I couldn't sleep.
Is it on our page or is it on some other?
No, I didn't put it up. Actually, I just logged on to For Us. So let me see if I can find it, and just hand you the link. I know I saved it to my own personal one, because there's so many things I'd like to send out, and then I realized I'm just being a pest. So a lot of them I just say for myself, but let me see if I can find, it's Reagan Bush debate. Let me see on YouTube.
I suppose I can't really play it here, so.
Well, you'll play the sound, and you know, it's almost comforting to listen to Reagan.
How's this for modern era? We're on the radio, but we're sitting here typing on the computer.
Typing on the computers about a video, but once we find it, you'll hear the sound, and you'll be able to push it out. I just found it.
Well, there's a bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them, but let me see if.
My name's David Grossberg, and I'd like to know, do you think the children...
Yeah, there it is.
Yes, my name's
It's
David
the
Grossberg,
one
and I'd like to know,
labeled Ronald Reagan George H.W. debate on immigration with Mexico
or do you think that their parents should pay for their education?
on YouTube. And I think the question is legit. I think it still applies. It's a young man on this at the debate. It looks like one of those open things, and the young man you'll hear
Okay.
asks. There are undocumented here. Do you think they should pay for their education or get free education for their kids?
Okay, I'll just play it here. So this is the clip we're talking. Pretty short.
It's pretty short, yeah.
Yes, my name's David Grossberg, and I'd like to know, do you think the children of illegal aliens should be allowed to attend Texas public schools free, or do you think that their parents should pay for their education?
Who are you addressing that to?
I think you first.
He was looking right at you. I said he was. Look, I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem that would be so sensitive and so understanding about labor needs and human needs that that problem wouldn't come up. But today, if those people are here, I would reluctantly say I think they would get whatever it is that they're, what the society is giving to their neighbors. But the problem has to be solved. The problem has to be solved because as we have kind of made illegal some kinds of labor that I'd like to see legal, we're doing two things. We're creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law, and secondly, we're exacerbating relations with Mexico. The answer to your question is much more fundamental than whether they attend Houston schools, it seems to me. I don't want to see a whole, if they're living here, I don't want to see a whole thing of 6- and 8-year-old kids being made, one totally uneducated and made to feel that they're living outside the law. Let's address ourselves to the fundamentals. These are good people, strong people. Part of my family is an actual...
This is Bush, this is a Republican, and this is a presidential candidate.
sensitive enough to our size and our power. They have a problem of 40 to 50% unemployment. Now, this cannot continue without the possibility arising with regard to that other country that we talked about, of Cuba and what it is stirring up, of the possibility of trouble below the border, and we could have a very hostile and strange neighbor on our border. Rather than making them, or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back, and they can cross and open the border both ways by understanding their problems. This is the only safety valve right now they have with that unemployment that probably keeps the lid from blowing off down there. And I think we could have a fine relationship, and it would solve the problem you mentioned also.
This is a Republican, this is a presidential debate, and this is the guy that won and eventually made an adjustment in immigration. Now,
Wow.
when I look at that, I say to myself, this is not a Republican versus immigrants. This is some Republicans that have chosen to be like that.
Yeah.
Even Bush's son, when he won, I mean, eventually, the other Bush won, and then the next Bush won, and they were all pro-immigration reform.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, maybe it's age, but I have not seen this in the partisan ways that these two, well, let's say at least three of the candidates are making it out to be.
Yeah.
You know, they're crazy. They're pandering. We are pretty sure that they'll change some of what they're saying past after they've gone beyond the primaries. But how embarrassing it is to be a party that says they're pro-business, and yet in this part they are not being pro-business at all.
No, they're not being pro anything. That's what's so strange. This is a real eye opener to me. I mean, I had been aware of the change, the drift in Republican attitudes towards immigrants and immigration, but it was it was just sort of in the back of my head. I knew they'd hardened it and become more strenuous about it, but I didn't realize the extent. That was just in 1980. That's not that long ago.
It wasn't that far. Let me come back to one little part there that actually George H. finishes his little part.
Mhm.
He says, and remember the question for them was, should the kids of the undocumented pay for their education, or should we exclude them from a free education?
Right.
Besides the fact that even by 1980, the Supreme Court had already said they need to be included,
Right.
right? Because that was in '73 when the case went up. Besides that fact, the full hypothetical is worthy of consideration, and Bush does that. Bush father. Somehow I feel better about
Yeah.
Bush father than Bush. But the Bush is actually, Jeb isn't as bad as his brother, but he considers it and says the following: I would not like to see two little kids standing one next to each other, and one had a full education and the other one, and then he struggles to find the words, but basically the other one didn't.
Yeah.
That our nation could form two kids raised in our country, and then to give one the privilege. And he doesn't make a direct allusion, but I can't help but to think of slavery.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when you had a little black child and a little white child, and one was educated systematically and the one was excluded
Mhm.
systematically. And so I think to myself, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we do when we follow the rhetoric that today's people are saying, because they keep punting in the direction of where they think the wind will fly the ball
Yeah.
for their election. But really, that's what they're talking about. Every time that they exclude immigrants and exclude them from businesses, and I'm going to put a fence, and I'm going to, all this junk is really being it's not just racism, it is a classism that is just un-American.
Yeah.
It goes against, that all men are created equal. It goes against inalienable rights. It goes against all those columns of what our nation was built up to be, and that we strive over two centuries, that we strive to create. And then these politicians, as so many over the last 200 years, tried to galvanize the fear, the negativity, the whatever, the scapegoating. This is not unusual. 100 years ago, they used to call immigrants dogs.
Yeah.
And back then it was the Irish and the Italians.
Mhm.
A little before that, it was the Jewish. And before that, it was the Chinese. The Chinese were excluded by the very first law about immigration. We don't want any more Chinese here.
Yeah.
What? Look at us now and say, what? We want Chinese here. But for 200 years, there was a way of trying to keep them out because we were fearful that what? That they would educate us?
Yeah, there's something. I have a hard enough time understanding this way of thinking. I get parts of it. I'm sure you do too. You'll hear an argument and you go, okay, I sort of see, if you believe X, then it follows that You know, you don't want, like, if you really believe that there's a pool of jobs and they rightfully belong to us, and that when immigrants come here, if they get a job, they're taking one of those jobs from that pool, and it's our job that they're taking. So, I mean, if you're thinking about it that way, I get that. I think it's wrong, but I get what you're thinking. It's like, there's only X amount to go around, and anything that you get means I get less. And I can't do with less, because
There's
I'm
a
already
logical
struggling as
progression,
it is,
yeah.
you know. It's this idea that somehow there's just only so much and no more. And it ignores the fact that, you know, like all these immigrants come here. I had a series of guests from Stacy's class who were doing this survey of Urbana immigrant-owned
Businesses,
businesses.
yes.
And virtually all the businesses were things that wouldn't have been here. No one would have been doing that. It wasn't like they came in and started a muffler shop and they're competing with this muffler shop over here. You know what I mean? It was, they started something that was unique to their experience and their community and their kind of way of living.
And their first customers are other immigrants
Yeah.
usually, yeah.
And they created jobs and they hired people. And suddenly there's this whole like new thing that exists. And so now I, this citizen, this local person, I can go get Mexican ice cream over here. Or I can, you know, go get pan dulce over at the bakery. Or, you know, all these things that I didn't have that option before.
Well, that's a very positive way of looking at it. Let me give you two other reasons why in there that the little logical progression that they make is faulty. One is in the facts.
Yeah.
The number of immigrants that come in and get jobs actually create other jobs. The
Yeah.
two big economic impact studies, the North Carolina and the Texas one, that were done, absolutely show that there is a net gain, because when there are low-level workers, somebody has to manage them. When there are low-level workers, goods are produced at a reasonable price, and more people buy, and therefore the economy. So there's the one. The other one, though, is a worthy one for me in this way. When, and before it slips my mind, let me see if I can grab it back. Immigrant workers often do low-level jobs, labor jobs, but that's only part of the immigrant workforce.
Yeah.
The immigrant workforce is professors at the universities, the doctor, my doctor, and my dentist for the longest time were both foreign-born.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go very far in this town to realize that there is a high-level immigrant population too.
Yeah.
Governor Rendell used to say, when they asked him about why are we having H-1B visas and the H visas, but especially the IT ones. And he said, every time that a company hires an immigrant IT worker, it is our failure. And people would look at him and say, what? He says, yes, because in order to hire a foreign IT worker, the company has to post, has to create the position and hold it open for 4 to 6 months. And he said, if we had an IT worker that could take that position, it would be filled.
Yeah.
But it is our fault for not creating enough IT workers that companies have to go outside of our system to get them. And this works also in the other in the low-level jobs too, in this way. When an immigrant worker comes, people say about the wages and whatever else, but you know what? A worker at that level is a worker. You need hands to do, whether it's to flip this or to move that. Immigrant workers, as you stated at the beginning, have two huge disadvantages compared to local native workers. One, they don't have the language,
Right.
right? When they go to work, the hirer has to work extra hard to communicate what the task is and then risk that they will mess it up because the communication wasn't there.
Right.
So the native worker has a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Two, the native worker also has free education at least up until the 12th grade.
Mhm.
Most immigrants have no such thing. They come with, at that level, they come with such little education, and yet they're competing one with had the opportunity to go to the 12th grade. So when you say they took my job, wait a minute. You have English, you have education, and you have a social security number.
Yeah.
So what you're stating is, you're taking my job is, you know what? It was right in front of me and I let it slip by.
Yeah.
Because there's no immigrant that comes and says, you know what? I'm going to be a garbage collector. They want to be something better too. And
Yeah.
they'll take the better job and they'll be a garbage collector as long as it will help them get somewhere else. But they'll move somewhere else if they are able to, with all the disadvantages. So when people give me the half logic
Mm-hmm.
of they're taking my job, I'm like, inside myself, I'm saying, do you realize what you're saying?
Yeah.
That all your advantages were not enough.
Mhm.
You're the one that could train to do the whole run of that job. And yet, you are not able to get it and hold it. That to me is very sad.
Yeah, well, sometimes it just boils down to money. I know, and here's where I have to argue with people who say, well, the immigrants are not taking any jobs. Well, they've virtually taken over some aspects of like the construction industry. They're, roofers, for example. Every summer I go up and down and I see roofers all over the place. I've had people work on my house. I don't see anybody but Mexicans up there on the roof. I see a lot of people down on the ground with the clipboard that aren't Mexicans, but up on the roof, they're all Mexicans.
Mexicans and Guatemalans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to think that in that situation, the defining factor was, this guy will work for half what you will, or he'll work for less than you will, and that's why he's got the job.
Well, let me tell you a story though, because my clients, the ones I left in Philly,
Uh-huh.
one of them was a company that had, the first number that pops into my head is 122, but it was 120, 140.
Yeah.
It was a network of companies. This network of companies were remodelers, painters, lots of roofers,
Mhm.
but painters, masons, anything that has to do with repairing a house and remodeling, these companies were. They were all considered small companies, which meant that they grossed less than $5 million,
Right.
but they were not shabby. They each paid a good amount of money to be a member of this network. And my first encounter with them was when they called me up and they said, you know what, we always invite all the workers of these companies at least once a year, and then the owners also like to bring them to the conferences because we want to teach them manager and financials and how to sell a job. So they wanted to, this